think the first step to the process of building a good co-living business is like, where's your location? There are good locations for co-living and there are bad locations for co-living. I want to be very clear about this. And the things that make it a bad location could be regulations. Cities like Sarasota, Florida.
You're helping out a tenant base, city and area that people want to live in. And so you're helping them live in an area that can be more affordable now to someone who's working a job that maybe they're not making as much in yet, but they're able to afford a higher, living type of city, and which is awesome.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Peak Profits podcast. Today's guest is Sam Wegert, widely known as the co-living king and the number one authority in co-living real estate. Sam began his journey in 2011 with just a few rented rooms, and by age 23 had achieved financial freedom alongside his wife. Today, he leads a network of over 1,500 co-living doors, mentoring other investors to replicate his success. He's the founder of Scale Your Co-Living Real Estate and the mastermind behind the largest co-living real estate community in the world. With a background as a mixed martial arts instructor and business owner, Sam brings a rare mix of leadership, discipline, and entrepreneurial grit to the housing world. Sam, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris and Brian. Really appreciate it. Super excited for the opportunity to chat and talk all things real estate and anything else we get into.
Absolutely. Sam, can you take us back all the way to 2011 and how you kind of went from being part of martial arts to pioneering a co-living environment?
Yeah, it was an interesting mix. I mean, my parents put me in martial arts. I don't know if either of you guys are in martial arts, but my parents put me in martial arts for more discipline, more confidence. I was the kid who was always bouncing off the walls and breaking stuff. And my mom was just like, you have ADD, ADHD, like, let's get you in some martial arts. So martial arts was a really powerful journey for me. And I did that it was really fun. And but throughout that time, I ended up buying the martial arts school that I was in. And kind of a long story about how that happened, but I did that at a really young age, 16 years old. I bought the martial arts school that I was in. And then what ended up happening was, I got involved in a mastermind. And I've always been a fan of coaching and leadership in some capacity, And so I had this coach that pulled me aside one day and he said, Sam, how's your martial arts business doing? Because at this point I had a few martial arts schools. And then I said, man, it's doing really well. I'm really excited for it. And he said, yes, Sam, but about the thing about business is it has ups and downs. And it might not always do well. So be sure that you are skimming some off the top and putting into something else. He said, create a second engine. A little in your life, a financial engine he was referring to. And I said, okay, like that makes sense to me. I've got a little bit extra money now. And so I started skimming some off the top and I started putting it into real estate. And that was really kind of just the start. It just started with that one house. Actually, 2011 was when I bought my first house. And then I thought, well, I could buy one of these a year, but it kind of accelerated faster. And I ended up buying 2 a year and I ended up buying 3 a year. And so it kind of accelerated on that journey. And that was really the start of my real estate journey. Co-living and sharing the house kind of came in just as that journey was going. And so I can talk about that if you guys want me to get into that. But that was really the second engine piece was the piece that I think I wish a lot of people would understand. All my friends who are high W-2 earners or have businesses, and they all say, oh, I put all the money back into the business. Whenever I hear that, I just immediately get a little scared. I'm like, cool, business might be doing well, but what are you doing to build a second engine in your life? What happens if you get let go from your $500,000 W-2 job tomorrow? I think more people should be thinking like that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And it's a lot of what we touch on within the podcast and with a lot of our guests is building that secondary stream of income or diversifying your assets in your portfolio. And obviously being a real estate podcast, we talk many different ways to do that in the real estate world and how many different asset classes and strategies there are just in real estate specifically to be able to do that and diversify. So you mentioned co-living. Can you help us understand what exactly co-living is? You mentioned you started buying 2011, which is in hindsight a great time to buy, right after we came out of, the recession there, and you probably rode that wave up, till 2020, which is awesome. And so what was that co-living? So when did you migrate into that co-living and what exactly is that terminology?
Yeah. Co-living is really shared housing. In the olden days, people would have called them rooming houses or boarding houses, but they're way different than that now, because I bet when you guys think of a rooming house or a boarding house, what do you think about? You think of a rundown house that you walk in and it stinks and it's nasty and people don't clean it. But if you were to walk into one of our co-living homes, it would feel and look more like an Airbnb kind of vibe, that level of luxury, that level of being taken care of. And so I say all that to say, I bought my first house in 2011 really just because it was the right thing to do and I was diversifying. I was just putting money in real estate, which was, my mentors had said to create a second engine. So I said, well, I'll live for free. So I lived in one room and I rented out 2 other bedrooms at that. And so I kind of like basically my housing was free at that point. So we call that house hacking. House hacking is when you live in a home and you're trying to rent out some other pieces to reduce your income. It's a great way to get started. Actually, I think it's the number one way that people should get started in the game, right? Find something you can live in or use and rent out another piece of it. But then I moved to Charlotte for my martial arts business at the time. And I bought this other house, and I come from a big family, and I'm used to my siblings always picking on me, and I have 8 brothers and sisters. So I'm used to and we grew up in a 1,900 square foot house. So you can imagine not a lot of space, where it was 4 boys to a room, 4 girls to a room, and my parents lived in the basement. That was what I was raised in. And so, I remember buying my first house in Charlotte, and I remember just being there the first night. I was all excited. I closed on this house. I remember walking in. I remember 2 things very distinctly about that evening. I remember the heat was broken. It was like 50 degrees in the home. So I remember being cold AF. And then the second thing I remember was it's too quiet. I just need people in the house. So I said, I'm just going to rent rooms, not for money, not because I needed to, just because I wanted some community around me. I wanted to not be lonely when I came home from work. I was working a lot building my martial arts business. So I even had I had a big living room. I eventually rented out 2 rooms upstairs, and then I cut the living room in half, put up a wall, made a half bath, a full bath, and rented out a 3rd room. And one day I'm walking, I had one friend. I was working so much. I didn't have time for friends. I had 0 social life. It's amazing what you can really build with 0 social life. But anyway, I had this one friend, and we were out for a walk one day, and he's like, dude, aren't you renting your home by the room? I was like, yeah, I just got my 3rd roommate. It's awesome. We're having fun and going to these things. He goes, how much are you renting that house for? And I said, well, I'm renting the house, I guess, if you count me as a renter. And I did some quick math. I said $2,870. And he kind of was surprised. And he was a vice president of a bank. So he knew numbers. He was like, dude, you're renting that home for more than double what it would normally rent for. And I was like, didn't know that. Is that good? He's like, yeah, it's good. And so then we had this little conversation, and I just kind of went on this journey over the next 5 years of buying a primary residence with a primary resident loan every year, because you can get 1 a year, right? And I was like, can I go from 4 roommates to 5? Can I go from 5 to 6? Can I go from 6 to 7? Until I ended with an 8-bedroom house. When my wife met me, I had 6 roommates, and she was 6 plus me. She was like, what the heck is going on in this house? And we were all working professionals. We weren't college students. So it was new, right? So in essence, co-living is taking this space and sharing it amongst a bunch of people. And now we launched an 11-bedroom home. Now, granted, it's a 3,700 square foot home, but we launched an 11-bedroom home. So it's really a way where people can live in a room instead of the house. And you might say, who the hell would want to live that way? And the people who would want to live that way, a lot of times, are economically driven. They make between $15, $20, $25, $30 an hour. They work at the airports. They work at Amazon distribution centers. They deliver your Amazon. They work at Walmart distribution centers. They work, at hospitals. They work at universities. And they're not really making enough in a major city to afford a studio apartment after taxes and still have an amazing life. So they're looking for something cheaper. And so co-living allows the room to be the new apartment, and they share some space, but they get their own private room with a private lock, and they furnish it themselves. And that's, in a nutshell, is what co-living is. You're renting out rooms instead of the whole house.
That's incredible. And it's a really creative way to think about how can you break up a single family residence. We talk a lot on this podcast about multifamily, but that is kind of single residences or studio apartments, as you mentioned, whereas what you're referring to is everybody just has their room with a shared co-living space. Most people, myself included, probably do think of that more so as being the stinky rundown properties.
Yeah.
So help me understand, when you go into a property, how do you identify something that would be the right fit? You just mentioned your 11-room property that you just brought to the market. How do you go about identifying a property in a good area and building almost your business plan into this is what we want to do with it? You mentioned putting up walls, putting in new bathrooms in areas that were previously living rooms. How do you go about that entire process?
Yeah. I think the first step to the process of building a good co-living business is where you're going to put it. Where's your location, right? And the location has to support. There are good locations for co-living and there are bad locations for co-living. I want to be very clear about this. And the things that make it a bad location could be regulations. Cities like Sarasota, Florida, or Nashville, Tennessee have come out and just said, hey, we don't like this model, guys. We're going to fight it to tooth and nail or to the death kind of thing. It's well, I don't want to be in that city. I don't want to, even if I have a legal right, we have a legal structure that allows us to operate in most cities. But do I really want to fight a city like that? So you got to look at regulation. You got to look at what we call what's a co-living friendly city or co-living friendly state. And there are a lot. The majority of them are, and we have a legal structure that allows us to navigate in the ones that are kind of middle of the road. And then the second thing is, how needed is affordable housing, right? Someone brought me a town the other day. They said, Sam, I'd like to buy my first co-living house actually, I'll tell you the town. It was Jefferson City, Missouri. I don't know what you guys know about Jefferson City, Missouri. I didn't know a lot, but I know you can but after 15 minutes of research, I didn't know, by the way, it's supposedly Jefferson City is the capital of Missouri. Shows you how much I know about geography, but it's the capital. But like, you can get a studio apartment in Jefferson City for like $500 a month. So here's the problem of co-living in that city. Someone that makes $15 an hour can actually still afford a studio apartment, which is, and I keep bringing up a studio apartment because a studio apartment is usually the cheapest thing in every city, right? So that's kind of what you're competing with if you're in co-living business, right? But you should be able to be 60, 65, 55% of that. And now there's a huge gap of what people will choose. But like, really? Are you going to rent a room for $300? And if so, like, why would anybody rent that when like even cheap salaries, people making, basically what minimum wage has become is close to $15 an hour, even at fast food restaurants and stuff, like they can still afford a studio. So what's the demand in that city? Now I'm sitting right now in a town of Asheville, North Carolina. And Asheville is not a big city. It's only 50, 60,000 people, but a studio apartment goes for $1,300, $1,400. And there's not a lot of them, because it's like they're not developing in this city and it's a big tourist town and a lot of people want to live here. So affordable housing is desperately needed here, like it is in a lot of tourist towns in Colorado. So I say all that to say, you're really looking for what's the demand. And the ways that you can check on this is you could call the city and say, hey, like, what's the affordable housing need there? What is the average income? What's the average studio? A lot of times you can research that online, ChatGPT, call the cities. But once you do that, I think that kind of gives you some thumbs up. Now, if we go into a city and we're still skeptical, we'll actually run some test ads in that city. It's like our little hack for launching new cities is we'll like throw an ad out there and take photos from some of our other homes, and we'll just see what the response is and see what the response is at different price points. And then we'll tell everybody, hey, we're actually creating a waiting list for this home. Like, just fill out this form, right? So we can keep the integrity of this. But I think those are some ways just that your listeners can kind of try to identify what are some good locations and testing demand. But if there's demand and there's regulation friendly, then the third thing you got to ask is, can I make money as an investor there? So like, take San Francisco, for instance. Like San Francisco, regulatory, very friendly. Demand off the freaking charts. But are you going to be able to buy a house in San Francisco? Like, is your cash flow going to be there? And the truth is, it is, but not like a city like Charlotte. So as an investor, obviously you're looking for the sweet spot of like, where is the demand good and the regulation's good, but I can actually make money. And then the fourth question we tell people to ask is, can you manage it there? Because the hardest part about, as you can imagine, the hardest part about an 11-bedroom home is the fact that it's an 11-bedroom home, right? Like, and 11 adults share that space and that common space and are eating in the kitchen together. And there's some cool elements to it, like we're solving loneliness. We're bringing people back to community, which is kind of the anti-American, very individualistic. We all have our home and our gun and our white picket fence and 3 kids in a car. Like, we're kind of bringing the shared economy back to America, which I think is really important for me. But it still has some challenges. So can you manage it? So we talk about regulations. We talk about demand. We talk about, can you make money? Does the price point make sense when you run the numbers on the homes that you can buy? And can you manage it well there? Because management is hard. So do you have a team there? Are you willing to build a team there? Are you there personally to manage it? If you can answer yes to all those 4 questions, then that's a go city for us. And a lot of cities answer yes to those 4 questions, but you need to be thinking that through as an investor. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, for sure. You outlined it very well. And from a tenant standpoint, you're helping out a tenant base, like you mentioned, and you just elaborated on, that is in a city, an area that is highly, people want to live in, right? And so you're helping them live in an area that can be more affordable now to someone who's working a job that maybe they're not making as much in yet, but they're able to afford a higher, living type of city, and which is awesome. And so to shift, then we have a lot,
and a nicer, and just to add to that for a second, and a nicer neighborhood too.
Fair.
They might say, okay, my budget's 1,000, so I can rent, but I have to rent in this area, where it's like 1,000 room will get you a room in the nicest part of the city. Right. So these homes, just as some context. So I love that you brought that.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. And so then in shifting, a lot of our listeners are high income W-2 earners. They're doing due diligence on whether to actively invest in real estate, right? Whether they want to buy a property in their own market, if, they're in a smaller city, or, they might be in a bigger city. Now they're doing due diligence on, more passive investing or investing with operators, or, making their money work for them in other ways. So from an investor hat standpoint, what are you looking for when you're looking to identify properties? Say you've identified the town. Right now, there's a 4-bedroom, 2,500 square foot house come to market, and you say, all right, this 4-bedroom, 3-bath house is just put on market. It's 2,500 square feet. This looks like a good potential house for a co-living space. Like, talk to me about what goes through your head and like how you identify an actual property. Then, I'd imagine you buy it through, your standard traditional residential loan, 30-year mortgage. But can you walk us through that?
Yeah. I'll dive into the buy box a little bit here. And we launched something a few years back called the perfect co-living house method. It's our little trademark method of like finding a co-living house. And there's about 35 things, like we'll call it 35 boxes you got to check to ensure that it's the right home and that it's gonna fit this model. Because you're right, not every home fits this model, but there are a lot of homes that fit this model. And so I think, as this conversation has progressed, it's like, okay, I want people to understand like why co-living makes sense, right? It's filling this economic need. And there's like, okay, what city makes sense? And then like, okay, now that I've decided on a city, you guys are very correct. Like the next logical step is like, well, okay, I'm in that city. So what exact house am I looking for? And I'll give you kind of the 4 or 5 big things that I think people need to look for. So the first thing is, you already mentioned, is size. Like ultimately, the bigger the home, the better. Because it not only allows you to have more rooms, which is going to just increase your cash flow, but even if you decide not to do like I've done and do 10 or 11 or 9 rooms or whatever, you're going to have bigger rooms. And people, when they're renting a room, a bigger room is just better. People want that. They want their space. Plus, people are going to be more spread out. So you're going to have less conflict. So size matters, right? Size is important. Number of bedrooms doesn't matter. Like, I don't care. Like, I bought a home that was recently here in Asheville that was 3,850 square feet. But it was on a 3-bedroom septic. So guess what? They were only able to list it as 3 bedrooms. But I don't care about that. I care about the size, right? And I can convert the rest to what I need. We can table the whole septic point for a later thing. And there's always question people like, septic? What? So, but my point in saying that is, okay, so there's that. So I'm looking for a big home. Now, I wouldn't look at anything less than 2,000 square feet. 2,000 square feet without looking at the floor plan, without anything, I can tell you that's going to be at least 6 bedrooms. Like, this is our little like quick and dirty formulas. 2,000 equals 6. Well, how do you know? I just know. I've looked at thousands of homes, right? 2,250, so add 250 square feet, means that somewhere in that house, unless it's like the biggest open concept floor plan of the century, I can get 7 rooms. And then every 250, it goes up a room, right? So if you bring me a 2,500 square foot house, I'm like, hey, I know there's 8 rooms in there somewhere. I haven't even seen the floor plan. I haven't looked at pictures yet. I know there's 8 rooms in 2,500 square feet somewhere. 2,759, 3,010, 3,250. You guys get the math. That's kind of the little quick and dirty formula we use to identify how many rooms and per the square footage. So that's number 1. Number 2, I would say, in a lot of the cities that we're in, parking is kind of the next big box we have to check. And if we don't have parking, it kind of nicks the home. Now, you don't need 100%. Like if you have 11 rooms, you don't need 11 parking spots. But if you have just for easy math, we say it's 2/3. So if you have 12 rooms, you need 9 parking spots. And parking spots could be like, okay, there's a driveway. I could fit 3 people on the street because street parking's allowed. It can be, I'm going to add a little gravel pad to the right of the parking or gravel pad to the left. Now I've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, I'm good. Like it's a creative process. It's not just a check mark of like it has it or it doesn't. It's, can I add it? Can I make that part of this thing without pissing off every neighbor in that neighborhood, right? So that brings me to my third big thing is the neighborhood a fit? And I'll be honest, at first, when I first started buying Columbia homes, I didn't pay much attention to this one at all. And then then you skip the neighbor that's like calling the cops on you every day, or like, it's like, man. So simple way to do this is I usually tell a quick story. I had this friend who's buying he's buying his 3rd co-living home. He's in my program. He's buying his 3rd co-living home in Charleston, South Carolina. Already a very litigious, old money, kind of like we have it our old way city. And man, he sent me this home, and I got on Google Earth and I drove the neighborhood on Google Earth. And I was like, dude, this is going to be a problem. Like every home there has white picket fence, like grass is perfectly long. I didn't see a single car in the street. I was like, I don't like it. He's like, no, man, we're going to do it. I was like, no. Finally, I convinced him to go out of it. And the next week he goes to the other side of town in a different neighborhood, and he sends me a video. As he's driving through this neighborhood, he's like, I see a work truck in someone's front yard. I see someone's grass a little long. By the way, these are all thumbs up signs, right? I see, and then as he drives, I see a goat, like a legit goat in someone's front yard. And I was like, okay, maybe we went too far on the other end of the spectrum. But does it fit that neighborhood? An extra car or 2, is that going to be a problem for people? Okay. So you've got size. I mean, it goes without saying, no HOAs. Like, just don't even. I've been in a lawsuit with an HOA before over this model. They threatened me. They threatened me with they wanted to backdate a fine. The HOA wanted to backdate a fine for all the days that I had been co-living. So this fine came to like $365,000. The whole home was only worth probably like $500,000. But as you guys know, like HOAs can lien your house. Like if they do a little board meeting, that's their little court case is the board meeting. The people on the board hate you, which they did. They were just like, yeah, we're gonna find this guy. Anyway, long story short, I ended up being like, funny you guys are like talking about this home. I was just getting ready to sell it and kick everybody out. And so that's what I did. But I don't want to be in that situation again, right? Like I hate HOAs, right? So did I say I hate HOAs? I actually 100% mean that. I've had so many bad experiences. So just stay away from them, especially with this model, right? So those are some big ones. I'd say those are a few. So a quick recap. So you're looking for size, you're looking for no HOA, you're looking for a good city. Obviously, we talk about city. We're talking parking's got to check a box, and then does it fit the neighborhood? If you kind of check those boxes, then maybe the last little bonus one I'll add on here, and again, there's a lot more I could go into, but the last little bonus one is it already boxy? We call this term like boxy. Like was it built in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s? Because those homes, they didn't care about the kitchen flowing into the living room, flowing into the dining room, and it all being one open big room. They like dining room is actually a separate room. That makes it so much easier for me to convert the dining room to a bedroom, right? I still need a kitchen in the common area, but it's just easier to convert those homes with cheaper cost. That's gonna be really important. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of detail. I think you said there was like a 35-step checklist.
Yeah.
And
We've got more nuanced things.
Yeah, scratch the surface of that there. I think for anybody listening, one of the things you mentioned is driving through the neighborhood on Google Maps. I mean, regardless of whether you're buying a single family home, a co-living space, a multifamily apartment, I think that's often very underutilized method of just checking out the general neighborhood, going left, going right, really driving around. Where's the nearest school systems? What is around? You do find a lot, including goats. Apparently, Sam, I've never seen a goat when I've done this. But that's really awesome. I want to understand how creative you get. You mentioned you got creative in terms of like how many rooms can you make out of it? You got creative in terms of the number of parking spaces. I would also say the neighborhood is getting fairly creative as well to a certain degree because you're understanding how could you fit within that neighborhood.
Yeah.
But what about kind of financing these properties when you go to buy it? Like, is there an opportunity to get creative with the financing side? And if so, have you done that? And how have you been able to do that on a co-living space?
Yeah, good question, man. Man, this is a masterclass in and of itself right here. It's the financing of these things. Yeah. I wanna say this for listeners because co-living is a really creative space. It's new, it's up and coming. It's like Airbnb was in 2012, 2013. When Airbnb was up and coming, people were like, wait, how does that work? Can you actually make money? So I feel called to just make one point before I answer your question. And the point I want to make is like, why would anybody want to have to be in an asset class where you have to get this creative? And the answer is, and I haven't even said this on this podcast, and usually I lead with this, and this is the sword I'm dying on, so to speak. I believe this is the highest cash flowing real estate asset class in the marketplace today that's simple and easy to get into. That's not like something crazy complicated, because you can take a single family home, that would normally rent for, I'll give you an example of one the 11 bedroom, I'll give you an example of that. It would normally rent for $2,600 a month, and it rents for $8,800 a month with like long-term people living in the home, right? So you can imagine the cash flow is about $4,200 on that home net after everything's paid, right? Mortgage payment's about $2,500, right? So I say that to say, like, this is one of those asset class, and I'm saying this because I want people to understand, like, yes, it's creative, and yes, like, it's just like banks haven't fully caught up to this strategy yet, so you do have to get a little creative, right? And we'll talk about that here in a moment. But like, I want people to understand why I'm not just doing it because like it's cool to do co-living. I'm doing it because it solves a social issue. It helps solve affordable housing at the same time. It's a very, very high cash flowing asset class, and with a few homes, you can be in a place where maybe you're not flying private jets everywhere, but you're in a place where there's some freedom in your life as long as they're run correct. I want to be very clear. There are definitely a lot of ways to screw up co-living. As long as it's run correctly and the management and the systems and the legalities are in place, this can be a really cool asset class that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about right now. So that's kind of my mission, is to share that with the world. So when it comes to financing, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day is, I don't know, there's kind of different categories, right? Like if you can buy it as a primary residence, like buy it as a primary residence and live in it for a year. That's how I bought my first 6 homes. And a lot of young people, maybe that aren't married or kids, are doing that. I had this one family come to me recently. I think this is a cool hack. I hadn't heard it before. They said, Sam, because I was telling people, I was like, oh, you can use primary residence loans, but like if you have family and kids, probably not for you. And that is one family come to me. He had a wife and 4 kids. And he goes, we're going to do the primary residence loan. I was like, wow, you guys are going to live with housemates? And he was like, no, we're going to buy the home for co-living, live in it for a year with nobody. And as soon as we leave to go buy the next home, we're going to then fill it with co-living members. And I was like, that's cool. I call it like advanced house hacking. It's like you're always one house ahead of whatever you do, but you're buying it with the intent to co-live it. And he was like, yeah, Sam, like if I move my family once a year for 3 years, I have 3 years, I get, $6K a month in cash flow. Like that's a 3-year sort of retirement plan. And I was like, dude, that's a sick way to look at it. So that's an advanced house hacking. But when it comes to like traditional loans, I mean, I do have a lot of people back in the day are still doing it now. Used to use second home loans, like vacation home loans for co-living. I'm for Airbnb. And that's also a strategy you can use for co-living. You're supposed to vacation in it usually 14 days out of the first year. So those loans are easy to get and underwritten based on your income. Then you've got this whole world of debt service loan, which I'm sure you guys know a lot about, right? Because they're very popular even in the multifamily space of like, okay, how do I buy a home as an investor? And these loans require 20% down a lot of times, sometimes 15, you get 15 to 25% down. And what they require you to do is have a home where the rent on that home covers the mortgage. And if the bank sees that, they'll give you the loan. And in essence, that's what you have to prove to the bank. Now, here's the problem. Banks don't a lot of times see co-living income yet. So you might say, bank, this home's going to do $8,000 a month. And they're like, yeah, right. As a single family home, it's going to rent for $2,000. And you're like, come on, bank. So the scrappy play right now is convince the banks to take that. We like to have our first bank as of like 2 months ago that will now look at co-living income. So like that's positive. But a lot of times we have to bring in like Airbnb income as a way to get it to debt service. Because there are a lot of banks, because Airbnb is a little bit more of a mature asset class. There are a lot of banks that will look at Airbnb income or projected Airbnb income and say, okay, well, Airbnb income looks like it'll cover the mortgage, so you're good to go. You can buy the house. And so that's a lot of what we look at. The one other creative thing I'll say that we do is, we have a strategy where a lot of times when we negotiate for these homes, there's always like work that has to be done. So there might be a bathroom, walls, closets that have to be added. So it could be 10, 15, 20, 30 grand of work. And we always get the seller to pay for that work as part of the negotiation. So that's something just as it's like a big seller concession. We call it an invoice authorization because it's written directly to the contractor, which allows us to get over the standard 2 or 3 or 4% limit. We can get bigger ones like $40,000 invoice authorizations, or sometimes $50,000. So 2 ways that we're creative: how we underwrite it to get it to debt service, and then how we get the seller of the home to pay for the work that needs to be done.
No, that's great. And thank you for walking us through that. Couple things that come to mind now that we've covered the financing aspect of it and identifying what that looks like is bringing it to market, right? So this is obviously a newer type of strategy or a strategy, I guess you said, that hasn't been embraced as much, but there's a lot of demand because there's a housing shortage, right? And especially in these cities that are very expensive. What does it look like when you are advertising for a co-living space to potential renters? And what are you, from like a lease perspective, like you mentioned earlier, running ads in a market to test that market? So say you just bought this 5-bedroom house and now you need to fill it with 5 tenants. What are you doing today and for the next, I guess, 90 days to make sure that house is full and starting to generate revenue for you?
Yeah, there's some basic things that I'm sure your listeners know. Obviously, like, do you have a good ad?
Yeah.
Do you have a good pictures? Are you in a good location? So I think there's some of those basic things, but ultimately renting a room is not unlike renting anything else. Right. On the front end, it's the same as renting an apartment or renting your whole house, right? You're going to list on as many places as you can possibly list on. And there are a lot of specific sites to list on for co-living. Right. So that's maybe the difference is like, okay, like roomies.com is not going to allow you to list your multifamily place, but it'll let you list a room because it's Roomies, right? Or Roomster or Zumper or what, there's a bunch. There's probably 25 sites out there. So ultimately you want to be in every window because people are window shopping for rooms. So you want to be out there. I think and then, leads come in. So you're going to list on all the platforms, leads come in. And I think the big difference in co-living is how you then vet those people. Because you're going to want to vet a little bit to have they ever done co-living before? And if they haven't, how are they, do they truly understand what it is? And are they going to be that problem person in a home? So there's a little bit more of, I don't know if the right word is intangible, right? You're looking for a few things to identify that they're going to be a good fit. Like we love, for example, we love type B personalities. Like not the like, I'm type A, right? You guys are probably type A. Like, right. So like we like people that are just like, I'm quiet and I'm in my room and I'm an engineer and I don't like to talk to people. And I need high-speed internet because we provide that in all our home. Like I just need good internet. I got my room and I go out on the weekends and like I'm quiet. Like that's who we like. Yeah. Right? Type A, they're always up in everybody's business, loud, whatever. It's like, nah, they're good. But again, not that obviously you can't 100% vet for that, but you are vetting for
It's not a question on your lease or your application. Are you type A or type B?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually we do an in-person showing and we do a vibe check with them. Now you have to be careful. There are some discrimination laws, but we have a legal structure. We're actually a lot more set up like a club. We're like a private, almost like think of a fraternity club. So we don't even have leases. We actually have membership agreements. They sign this membership agreement. It allows us to kick them out faster and easier, have better house rules. And then it allows us to like be a little bit more choosy, picky. But that's a whole nother ball game to get into that subject. But ultimately, yeah, that's the vetting aspect. And then of course you're doing all the normal things. You're going to do a credit check. You're going to do a background check. You're going to make sure they don't have any violent crime. You're going to make sure they don't have as much debt. You're going to try to make sure they're just a good tenant. But I think a lot of it is similar to how you would rent something else. The biggest piece in this whole model that everybody asks is like, but how do they get along? Like, how do they not kill each other? Like, what if someone's coming over? Like, literally, I was on a challenge the other day and someone was literally, these are the kind of questions I get from potential investors. Like, what if someone is having loud sex in one of the bedrooms and like all the other people can hear it? I was like, and like things like that can actually happen, right? So you have to have systems. I mean, I can't tell you, let me see if I can even pull up just to give you guys you have to have a system for how to communicate and eventually kick people out. Like you have to be able to terminate their membership. That's why we use membership agreements. But you have to have everything from what if someone's smoking, like things you wouldn't things you wouldn't deal with as much in a place. What if someone's having too many guests over? They're allowed in the house rules. They're allowed a certain number of guests. What if they're having too many guests over? What if they're not clean? What if not cleaning up after themselves? What if they're just too loud? What if they're being aggressive in the house? What if they're bringing in pets when we don't allow any pets? What if they're not paying? I'm scrolling through some of the like big systems that we have. What if we don't allow any guns or weapons? You got to have this like tight knit kind of like, this is how this house operates. And you will get a warning or maybe 2 warnings, but then we kick in your ass out. Like you got to have that. And not like, and either you or your management team. And I'm very grateful and thankful to have an amazing management team that manages my wife and I's few hundred of these. Like somebody's got to be willing to deal with that. And if you're not, you can't get the cash flow. You should go, do something else. But like I'm trying to give people the real on this podcast of like how this goes down. But once you have the systems, and that's honestly what a lot of I do for people is they're like, this is awesome and I get the cash flow and it's awesome, but I don't want to do it. It's like, cool. My team will do it for you. It's not cheap. It's not for free, but like, we'll do it for you because there's a lot that goes into it, but we have that ability and we're trying to scale that ability for people. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. And that leads me to quickly, as well as insurance. Is insurance the same as what you would get from like a landlord policy? Or how kind of gotta be careful with that too, I'd imagine, with how you're communicating that to the insurance company.
I mean, my disclaimer is like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an insurance agent. Like talk to your insurance agent. I put normal on a lot of my policies. I will put normal landlord policies, but it's because the legal structure we have, I only have one lease on my home. I'm leasing my home from my company that owns it to another company that has a couple hundred members. That's a corporate route. So they just lease it. And in the United States, that LLC is one company, one person, right? So I'm technically leasing my home to one person. What that company does with it is their business.
Got it. Yeah.
At least that,
Yeah, that makes sense.
From one perspective, that structurally. So, but yes, I mean, there are insurance for a while was like, for a while, insurance companies were kind of like, we don't really care too much to learn about this strategy. But I think now as it's come up, there are specific insurance companies that are catering to this. So there's a lot of options now, whereas there wasn't maybe 2 years ago.
And so you mentioned their systems are really key to this and kind of managing, and that were quite a lot of rules. I'm sure you didn't have all of those on day one, and there were the scenarios that happened, made you add those additional rules in place.
Yeah, there were.
Talk us a little bit about your co-living mastermind and how you are ultimately helping other people do this.
Yeah. And just a note about the rules, because you said that we have a rule that's no Bitcoin mining because we pay the electric bill. So as you might imagine, like, right, this is like silly things, right? Like, or the one where we were like, no loaded weapons, like not even loaded, but like no weapons in the space because some guy was like leaving his handgun, his Glock, just like around the common area, and we were like, dude, like, okay, like keep it. So yeah, just funny ways of like, okay, and keep in mind, my first experiment was 2011. So like I'm almost a decade and a half into this. Like I've seen a lot, even to the point, like, anyway, we'll share that one for those. We had someone pass away in one of the rooms, which you have that with apartments too. Someone could die in an apartment or something, but a little bit more personal when it's like, hey, there's a smell coming from room 3. Can you guys check it out? And you're like, damn. So anyway, yeah, you got to have some things figured out, and that's what we help. So that's a good segue to answering your question, Chris. Is like I help people in really 2 ways. If people come to me and say, Sam, I get co-living, I don't actually mind, if this cash flow is as great as you say it can be, which, be clear, I'm on a podcast, a public forum. I'm not promising anybody on this podcast that what I've shared is what they will get, right? Because that's an earnings claim, and I'm not allowed to do that. But like at the end of the day, I'm just sharing what the power of this could be if people are willing to lean into it a little bit. That you don't have to have hundreds or thousands of units. You can if you want this crazy life, you want to fly private jets, whatever. But like you don't have to. You can do this and have a few homes and create some freedom for yourself. And that's what I'm really passionate about, is helping people get to a basic level of freedom that they don't have now. They might be making $500,000 from their job, but if that were to go away tomorrow, they're on the street or they're not able to pay their bills. So let's get to a place where you have some checks coming in, where you're able to pay your basic. I call it the ramen noodle level of financial freedom. Like you can't earn $1 from any other sources in your life. You and your family, you might be eating ramen noodles, but you're surviving. You got the roof over your head, your cars are working, your insurance is paid, and you're okay. That's level 1. Then there's a second level, which is like where you're at now, comfortable. And then there's the baller level of financial freedom. So there's steps and levels to this. And so my passion is helping people get there through either done with you. Like we'll come alongside of you, we'll help you, we'll support you, we'll coach you, we'll give you calls, we'll give you the finances, we'll introduce you to the lenders. Like everything you need is there. We'll give you all the systems, all the checklists, all the templates, or done for you. And done for you is literally someone who's like, I have some money, I want to invest it. I don't like Sam, I want to hear the stories, but I don't ever want to have to take a call ever. So can you find the house? Can you negotiate it? Can you rehab it? Can you do these things that it takes to do? And if someone's in that boat, we have that option too. It's just a more expensive, higher tiered price point of what we provide because it's very time intensive. And it's the same teams that do my homes do these teams. And we can't do it everywhere. We can only do it in like 8 cities right now. But they're the best. It's the Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Denver, Phoenix, Charlotte, Jacksonville, Tampa, St. Pete, and Asheville. Like those are our like white glove service cities, and we're growing that all the time. And Atlanta. I didn't say Atlanta. Atlanta's another one too. So we've got good teams in all those markets I just mentioned to do the done for you. But we can support people in that as well. But the third way, and this is the way I tell people that they can just get, if they're like this, if this podcast has kind of sparked any interest, once a month, I do an event called a 5-day challenge. It is literally completely free. There's like a $27 little upsell you can buy if you want the checklist, but you don't have to. And you still get a ton of value. It's not one of these webinars that's a big sales pitch. I literally do a deep dive every day into co-living. I kind of walk people through a journey of getting their first co-living home. It's amazing. We obviously do have an offer on that day 4, but we don't even force you to listen to it. You can bounce from the webinar if you want to not listen to it. But if you want to come in and hear more about it, that I'd recommend going to www.scaleyourrealestate.com. There are 2 R's next to each other, scaleyourrealestate.com, and just get on the waiting list for the next one. And we've had probably 10,000 people come through the webinars now and just rave about it. And like, I had someone the other day that was like, Sam, I took your webinar and like, I just took that information and got 4 homes. And I was like, cool. It's probably give away less so that like people buy my stuff. But like, I was like so excited and pumped for him that he was like, anyway. So that's my shameless plug.
Have you trademarked ramen noodle financial freedom? I think
not yet. I probably should. Yeah.
That was pretty good. And we'll put the link in the description so people can sign up and find where that 5-day challenge ultimately is as well.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that, buddy.
Yeah, that's. I can imagine the amount of value you can get out of a 5-day webinar where you're just kind of going on. We've only spent 41 minutes here today, and we've already covered a ton of really valuable information, right? Yeah. So I'd imagine if you're putting on a 5-day challenge monthly, and this is something that you're hearing and it's of interest, I would definitely check that out. And so, yeah, I guess from there, Sam, we've covered a ton of great information today. What advice would you give to some listeners out there that are potentially on the fence in looking into real estate investing? And this is the first time they've heard the strategy. And they're like, do I want to buy a single family home? Do I want to potentially learn more about the co-living space? Or do I want to invest into another asset class? What, if they're sitting here today making, several $100,000 in their W-2, but they want to create that freedom or take that step to do so, what advice would you hand out?
Yeah, man, I was with my cousin last week and he makes $500,000 in a W-2 job. And this is literally what he said to me. And I bet a lot of your listeners can resonate. He goes, Sam, why would I freaking spend all that time and energy to get a home? He's a recruiter. He's like, he's on commission too, right? So he was like, if I close one more recruiting deal, I make 40 grand. Like, why would I and that could take me 10 hours, but like, why would I go do this? And it makes me what, $1,000 a month, like 2,000, because I was telling him, I was like, dude, no, like these co-living homes can do 2,000, some of them 3 big ones. He's like, but who cares, right? Like it's a lot of work and I got to learn it and this. And I'll tell your listeners exactly what I told him. I said, look, man, I said, I'm glad you're earning that much money. And then the side thing is I just tease him about how much taxes he pays.
Yeah.
35% of taxes. I'm like, it's 500, buddy. Like, right. So I was teasing about that. So like, obviously real estate, I pay, I got a refund check. I'm proud of this. I just got a refund check of $80,000. Wow. I paid in $80,000 just in case, because my accountant was like, paying. We had a big year last year. We got every cent of it back.
Wow.
And because of real estate. All bonus depreciation. And I was like, it was so cool. Like I got 80,000. So I say that to say, like, that's number one reason. Like, you're W-2, like, man, you got to like start thinking about taxes, because that has an immediate ROI because you're paying taxes, right? And figure out a way, if you can find a way for you or your spouse to get real estate professional status. There's all kinds of, like, you got to learn that world. But I think my biggest like pitch for those people is create a second engine so that if something ever were to happen, I know it's slow. I know it feels slow, but real estate is one of those things that just compounds over time. Now, I will say this, because my cousin brought this up. He's like, Sam, I would only do it if someone could do it for me. And I said, that's fine. Learn it. Because he was just like, the time doesn't make sense to put into real estate. So find guys like you, right? Find guys like me who maybe can like invest the money for you, or can have some sort of a done for you thing, or invest, but like, don't nix it. Like, start to build that engine that can spit out that cash flow. And I know for me, it took 5, 7, 8 years, but then it was like, I woke up and I was like, wait, all these properties have doubled in value. That's a cool thing. Wait, I'm not paying any in taxes, even off my education income and all the active income I'm making. That's really cool. And so real estate's one of those ways that I don't know any wealthy people that don't have some asset allocation in real estate. So I don't know. I'm not, maybe this isn't the strongest plea, but I would just say, learn about it, understand it. It will make you wealthy in multiple ways. And start building that second engine and get someone to do it for you, so it doesn't take up all your time and still crush your W-2. Because I don't think anybody should leave they're making a lot of money in W-2. Like, great, that's your cash cow. Stay focused on that, but start learning about this 10%, 15%, so you can build it.
I think that's a really good point, right? It's do you have the time to actively invest, or are you going to be more of a passive investor? And the answer is the same for everybody. It really does depend on your situation. And maybe that ramen financial freedom is what gives you that extra ability to do better in your W-2. That is very often, it takes stress away from you when you go through that process, whether you're in sales, whether you're in recruitment as well, right?
Yeah.
Not having to forcefully get that next 40K, or every conversation you're having doesn't necessarily have to be so pressure intensive.
Yeah.
Because you know that you have some income on the side, where even if it is the ramen noodle. I actually really, really like that phrase, Sam.
Let's go.
Because everybody assumes that it has to be this massive
That's right.
value of money
That's right.
every single month. And the reality of it doesn't. It could just be a few $1,000s. It could.
That's right.
Obviously, the dream is, as long as you can cover your expenses, like you said, that really is a level of freedom that it takes to get. Well, Sam, we really do appreciate you jumping on and joining us today. One last time, where can people get hold of you on all socials? No need to feel like it's a shameless plug. Let them hear it.
Yeah. Instagram is good too, at Sam Wegert, at SAMWEGERT, and then www.scaleyourrealestate.com if they're interested to learn more about co-living. That's what I would say. But thank you guys for the opportunity, Bryan. Great to meet you. Chris, great to meet you guys, and great to connect. And thank you for the opportunity to be on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was great meeting you. Ton of great value, and look forward to this episode coming out.